Thank you very much, Karel, for your nice introduction. Yeah, I have several disadvantages this afternoon. One is speaking after the lunch. The second one is I'm originally a banker, sorry. And third, I'm coming from outside of the EU. But I heard that it is a worldwide conference, so it should be no problem. The biggest advantage that I have this afternoon is that I haven't got a title on my speech, because in the program there's only keynote speech, so I can talk about anything. So I'm really free for that. I was very happy to see that Serving Our Customers in Tomorrow's World is the title of the conference, because we are doing research on the customer side in the insurance industry for more than 15 years now. When we started looking at the customer, some people were laughing at us because it was a time of the big mergers. Companies were talking about shareholder value. Also in the insurance industry, we had all these old finance fantasies around 2000 and so on. But now the customer is coming up, and we are very happy to share some insights out of our research that we have done. So customers seem to be a quite new perspective, and I have listened to several panels this morning, and I was amazed how much the customer is in the focus of the insurance industry. But I still have the feeling that there are a lot of discussions centered around the customer from a provider's perspective. So it was not originally the customer's perspective, so maybe it would have been better to invite a customer to speak here this afternoon. But I will try to take this role and act as a representative of the customer perspective. What I think is key for the future in the insurance industry is that customer value creation in insurance is key. Creating a value that is perceived by the customer and that is valued by the customer. And when I look to the changing environment in insurance industry, I have to say, based on our data that we have gathered, that the buyer-seller relationship in the market is changing. Today, markets are built around products. They are built around industries. In the future, that will change tremendously. And the biggest change driver is the customer and his or her behavior. So the markets of the future, that is my hypothesis as a framing for the following data, is that the markets of the future will be built around customer needs and not around products. I think that is the biggest change that we have to face. And then the question arises, what is then the value proposition of an industry that is called insurance so far in a bigger market? So let's make an example. When you are selling motor policies today, tomorrow you will have to ask, what is our contribution in a mobility market? Because the need of the customers is mobility. The need is not a policy. So that is the question we have to raise. And the same will happen in the health markets and all the other markets that you are serving today as exclusive insurance markets. Then we have heard a lot about mobile, social, and digital. I think that is a development that is here. I think technology is not a change driver. It's only an enabler. And we have to make something out of it. Making something out of it that is of value for the customer at the end. I've heard a lot about regulation. Still, on all insurance conferences, we are talking about regulation. We're still talking about Solvency II. But at the end, everything is aimed towards customer protection, consumer protection, and that is one of the topics I would like to talk about afterwards. So in a changing market, in a changing environment that we are in as an insurance industry, the question is also, what is the role of regulation in an environment where the boundaries of the markets and of the industries are blurring? The industries get together. You can guess in which industry Google is in. You can guess in which industry Apple is in. So it's hard to define. So as regulation is still focusing on industry boundaries, this also has to change, if my assumption is right. All right, so let's start and go a little bit into my topic, which is the consumer's view of consumer protection. This was an idea that we raised together with the Association of Insurers in Switzerland, and because from the regulation point of view, I think it was a lot about, discussed about the initiatives on IDD, on PREEPs, and all the other things, Solvency II. And when we looked a little bit deeper, we found that there is no study around that ever has to try to find out what customers think about regulation, especially consumer protection. So the simple question, do customers want to be protected? Nobody has asked before. So we just started and said, okay, let's do an empirical study, scientifically based, naturally, and try to find out what customers think about being protected. And there is a certain background. As you know, there had been some events in the past that refers to some unethical behavior. There are a lot of examples around, but I don't want to blame you on that. It's more about going back a little bit to the history. When we talk about consumer protection, we have to keep in mind that we are talking about diverging interests and rationales of selected stakeholders. As you see here, we have seen the insurer's perspective, we have seen the intermediary perspective, we have some consumer groups that pretend to take the interests of the customers. I don't know whether it's true or not. They also have their own interests. And nobody has asked the consumers so far. And we also have to keep in mind that the decision-making rationales are also differing. Some take the legal perspective, some the economic perspective, some the political, some the societal, very few the societal, very few, maybe too few. And naturally, the consumers take the individual, the behavioral perspective and say, okay, what should I buy? What do I really need? What would I buy if I knew what I need? So it's quite intangible, as we know, it's complex, it's extremely difficult to understand for customers what they are really buying. The goals of the study. We would like to understand more about consumer protection from a consumer standpoint. We developed, and I will show you afterwards, a typology of consumers in terms of their need for protection. It starts already with the language, protection. Somebody has to be protected. Is that right? What is the role of self-responsibility? Should I be protected against all risks? By the government or by the insurance industry? What is the role of self-responsibility of individuals in a society? That depends on the idea of man that you have and the picture that you create. And the third one is developing guidelines for achieving effective consumer protection in Switzerland. So it's really focused on the Swiss market, which is special, which is a very traditional one, but it's also a very profitable one. And so it's interesting just to focus on that market, but maybe we can also roll it out to other markets if some of you are interested in that. What is the empirical basis? We started with a kind of focus group. It's not a market research that we did, but really a scientifically based research. We try to get a basic understanding of how customers are really thinking about these topics. And when you really listen to customers, how they talk about insurance matters, that's interesting to see. I can only recommend that to everybody of you to really talk to an original customer if you haven't done so far, because then you get a feeling which language the customer uses normally. And that is totally different to the language that we are using or you are using as providers or that intermediaries are using in contact with the customer or when you look to the conditions of the policies. So it's about mindset. It's about knowing better how customers are framing the topic of insurance and the product and the whole situation where they are involved in insurance and the language used. Then we conducted some in-depth interviews additionally, and then an online survey which was representative for the Swiss population in terms of age, gender, and education. And as you see, the focus groups were conducted in Zurich, where next year this conference will take place, and St Gallen, which is a small village, an asterisk village, as I always say, in the eastern part of Switzerland. So you are all invited also to come there. We found at least 3 types of distinct types of consumers: delegators, pragmatists, and autonomous decision makers. What are the delegators? The delegators, and you see the quote there, they say it's basically an apprentice-master relationship for them. That is their view on insurance as a whole, and they are looking from that perspective on the topic. What does that mean measured in these 4 categories? Personal responsibility, quite high. Basic financial literacy, really low. Information behavior, which means do I actively search for information in that area? And general interest in insurance matters. So another 2 quotes here. To be completely honest, I never read it through anything, just signed the paperwork at the end. What is interesting here in connection with consumer protection, and there have been some research in the past, especially in the UK, on the vulnerability of consumers in that financial services area. And here we find, if you do an assessment here, that illiteracy is quite high and a heavy reliance on advice, so on the intermediaries that are helping customers really to take the right decisions. The second one, pragmatists. Insurance, just file it away somewhere. That was one of the basic quotes that we found in the interviews. Yeah, just file it. And maybe some of you also proceed like this. That is based on a higher level of personal responsibility, a felt responsibility. It's a medium literacy that we found here, a very low information behavior. They're not interested, just file it away. They're not interested in really investing time there, and also a medium interest in insurance matters. The last group that we found, autonomous decision makers, because I know exactly what I want and what I can do. So these people are convinced that they can decide on themselves. So we do not only ask the people, but we also measured with scientific scales about attitudes, behavioral tendencies, and also values that these people share. So it's a lot more based than just on market research data. What we found here is also a kind of passivity, but not so strong as in the second group. And they are relying on advice from others. So there's also a certain dependency on the advisors. When you look to the demographics, you will find different kind of distributions concerning age. You see the oldest group are the decision makers. From the gender side, it's also interesting to go a little bit deeper here. Male and female portions. And also from the background, from the educational background, you can see that there are huge differences in these groups, which is interesting, at least if you really want to target these people, be it from provider side or be it from the regulation side. So these are the quite distinct groups that we found, the 3, and maybe some of the main results that we found in the data. One of the questions that we posed was on the trade-offs between the security the people are aiming for and the costs that are involved. So are people willing to pay a higher amount for a higher level of security? And as you see, it's just one question out of the whole range of questions. We asked them, the high level of consumer protection in the field of insurance makes me feel safe. You see, it's split. All the questions, the answers the answers to the questions are split. And we took only the last question. The state should regulate the insurance market more tightly in order to protect consumers. We have 47% in the green area. We split them up and ask them, are you willing to pay for that? And you see 50% are not willing to pay anything extra for that. The rest is divided into other categories. What does that mean? Consumers do not necessarily support tighter regulation, especially when it involves additional costs. It is one of the first outcomes, I think. But some are. Consumer protection hardly registers in the insurance market. This was a second insight that we get. When you ask consumers about consumer protection, they think of public services, like postal service, like railway systems and other things. But they're not immediately thinking of insurance. Yeah? They're not aware that within insurance there is a topic like consumer protection. What are they protected against and what are their rights? However, a large percentage of the population, of this population, wants official help or governmental help, support during the decision-making process. So there is a need for a certain support, but if you would do such a study in different countries, I suppose that we get differences, cultural differences in the answers concerning these questions. A second part, which is also in the focus of all the regulatory efforts, is the information. We talked about this morning in different panels about we have to give more information. I think it's not about more information, it's about more selective information, because the danger of information overload is quite high. As you see here in this quote, I definitely asked my family and friends. So peers become of higher relevance to really take a good decision at the end. Otherwise, you end up in some loops in the web or where do you do your research. And the effects on vulnerability, incorrect assessments of risks and misunderstanding as regards to promised benefits can lead people to make the wrong decisions. That's clear. So if you have not available the right information, then maybe you take the wrong decisions. And that means also, on the other hand, if you use somebody like an intermediary, like a consultant, then you are depending on him or her, and that leads to other risks. And we will have to see whether in a more digitalized world in the future, we will see a stronger tendency for disintermediation as well. So this is an outlook to the world of tomorrow that is in the headline of this conference. Technical jargon in insurance policies, we also talked about this morning. I heard it already. More comprehensible wordings needed. Then a lot of people say, okay, we have to formulate in that way because it's a legal context, so we have to use certain words, sentences, to really make it clear, but clear to the judge, but not clear to the customer. So that's a difference. When you ask customers at the end, what do you really want to know about, there are only two things. It's about the benefits and the exclusions. That's what they want to know. Doesn't matter which line of business is affected, whether it's household insurance, life insurance, I don't know. All the lines of businesses, at least they only want to know what are the benefits and the exclusions. The theoretical explanation for consumer protection normally is based on information asymmetry. We have heard that consumers have only a rudimentary financial literacy. We ask a lot of questions about very basic economic things like interest rates, or inflation, purchasing power, very simple things, not complicated, but only out of 4 basic questions, 32% could correctly answer, and then only 2 of these questions, only half of that, and the rest even less. So you can see we are really working on a low level, and we can ask whose task is that to get better in that area. I think there have to be a joint effort between governmental part, education at school, but also from the industry side. I think we have to do something. You also see which group is affected here. It's also interesting to see. And But anyway, this is a topic that always comes up again when we talk about regulation and communication to customers. Because customers, we are all customers of any industry, and we know how other industries are really managing to make a better interaction, an easier communication, a better understandable, more comprehensible communication. And always the insurance industry, maybe also the banking, they are always very complicated, hard to understand. So in a digital world, we will see, or we already see, that communication is going a different way. Products get easier to understand and easier to access. The process gets easier, and also the environment, how it is embedded, gets easier. So we see already a lot of new companies that try to make it easier to interact with the customers. I just come back from Boston, where we visited a lot of startup companies, and we talked to them also in the financial services area. And the main difference is they do not have the framing of insurance. They're starting from a different point of view. They use technology, but they always start, what can we do that really is of value for customers? And say, okay, maybe by chance it's something in the insurance area. On the knowledge side, I think we have two axes that we have to look at. On the one hand, the knowledge about insurance should be better on the customer side. It's also a task that we have to fulfill, to enforce the knowledge on the customer side, but maybe also from the educational side. But also on the industry side, there is a task to know more about the customers. And here technology is helping us, as we have heard this morning. So it's also about really looking to the needs, to the basic needs of the customers. And as we know from research quite well, it's not an obvious need that we are targeting. It's always a latent need, because we talk about risk. And risk means I'm talking about all my wishes, my fears, my hopes, my dreams. And I'm not sharing that with my agent, yeah, or with my intermediary. So it's more about this to really target that latent level of needs of customers when we talk about risk and risk management. At the end, there is an interplay between governmental support, freedom of choice, and market innovation. You see these different aspects here. I don't want to go into each of this, but I think from the regulatory side, I have to say we have to avoid negative effects of regulation where possible. That means negative effects like costs, like over-regulation, like prevention of learning processes. Could be an interesting topic for a separate conference. Support consumers on the left side, you see that support consumers' desire to act on their own responsibility. Yeah? So it's also, I think it's a very important point to really go on the self-responsibility of the people. From a philosophical point of view, I always say, today, most of the insurance companies that I know try to sell security or safety. Maybe it would be better if we sell risk consciousness, risk awareness. Help people to be more aware of their risk and to manage the risk themselves. And only transfer those risks that they cannot bear themselves. And it's a little bit about this where we can also target on self-responsibility. The best example that I ever saw when I came from Germany to Switzerland many years ago, the first thing I learned is there is no dental insurance in Switzerland. So I have to skip mine in Germany. There's no regular dental insurance in Switzerland. What does that mean? When you compare this fact with the data on the quality of teeth worldwide basis, Swiss people have the best teeth in the whole world. Is this a correlation or is this a causality? The absence of insurance leads to a higher level of welfare. Let's think about this separately. All right, last slide. Findings of the study. Preserve consumers' freedom of choice. This is also one danger that we have to face. If regulation gets too tight, there will be providers that will step out of the market. We have seen that in the second pillar in Switzerland, and you see other markets as well. When it gets too tight, it's no longer attractive for providers to play there. And then the freedom of choice of the customers is vanishing. So we have to talk about more proactive and self-regulative actions from the industry side. Second, information for the customer, less is more. I think that is a clear result out of our study. By the way, you see 76% of the customers do not know what an ombuds office is. And at least greater knowledge of insurance and better customer understanding. So here, some initiatives should be taken from the private and from the public side. As we see, 1/3 of the Swiss customers have substantial deficits, as we see it, in basic financial literacy. Maybe they haven't studied in St Gallen. But anyway, that refers quite well. If you compare that with something which is very old, which is the Consumer Bill of Rights from John F. Kennedy from the 60s of the last century, that fits quite well here, because he claimed 4 rights of the consumers already in the 60s, which was the right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to be heard, and the right to choose. I think the biggest problems that we have is the right to be informed and the right to choose. In that sense, I would like to end, and thank you for your attention.